Oh boy. Welcome back. I'm super glad you're here. You guys doing okay? Are you getting thoroughly acquainted with other yet? Well, if I didn't pull you out of your slumber with tarot and archetypes, well, then maybe some quantum physics will do the trick, and more specifically, holographic theory. But before I go into quantum realms, I want to dig into the topic of existential angst just a little bit more, because resolving it is also at the core of the story. Dorothy's illustration as the hero in the journey is about finding life's purpose through the act of individuation and enlightenment. But the question of life purpose is actually anchored in the angst about our temporary nature here on Earth. And what to do with that? I mean, acknowledgement of our temporary existence becomes the ontology that drives us all towards the need for big changes, especially as we face the years ahead. So, what is existential angst exactly? MedicalNewsToday.com says it is a feeling of dread or panic that arises when a person confronts the limitations of their existence. Thoughts of our limited lifespan, the seeming meaninglessness of life, or the insignificance of self can all trigger existential anxiety. And how does existential angst contrast to ontological shock in the context of our discussion? The way I see it is they both lead to the feeling of discombobulation. But existential angst is the slow burn that leads to an attitude adjustment. Whereas ontological shock is when you're slapped in the face with the attitude adjustment. Both will leave you feeling pretty dang stressed out until you evolve through it. Oh, I think both are a sort of evolutionary process that results in growth. The chrysalis is probably pretty painful, but oh my goodness, the butterfly that emerges gets to take flight. So our heroes are all struggling with meeting a change in perspective. I think they were all experiencing existential angst along the road, but their experience meeting the wizard, only to find out he was a fake, put them in ontological shock. Their beliefs about him were destroyed, and because they thought that giant green head was their salvation, you know they were standing there on those stairs thinking, oh shit, what now? Thankfully, the lion stepped up with his courage. My mission here, at the deepest level, Yellow Brick Road Rash, is here to wake you from your slumber and shine light on some of the darkest corners of existence to show you that there is intensely beautiful, fun, and purposeful food for thought at every turn on the road, all pointing to convergence, or the wizard, or source, or God, or whatever you choose to name it. All the things I will cover over the course of the project are exactly the things that have helped me get through my own angst. And they have collectively led me to an understanding that one, everything I know as reality is not as it seems. Two, that there is so much more to the purpose of our existence. And three, we are not only not temporary, but we are absolutely infinite. Those are some pretty bold statements for some to hear, but I needed to dangle the eternal carrot. It matches my hair. As you will begin to see, starting with this chapter, the point of convergence is a place where all concepts point to one deliciously poignant place. It points to, well, quite frankly, it points to one. So as I mentioned in the last episode, after finishing Ancient Aliens, I wanted to find content that was more serious, more scientific about the topic of NHI. And I stumbled on Exo-Academian's Point of Convergence podcast from Apple Pods. He was just getting started, so it was extra fun getting to know his work from the very beginning. But what I soon learned was that if I only had a deeper scientific anchor, my left brain could grab onto what my right brain was already recognizing, that there was something to the entire NHI discussion that is more fundamental than we ever realized before. Little did I know that I was going to learn that there was something more fundamental to everything I know, and that this journey was going to take me to very faraway places, somewhere over the rainbow. Well, after weeks of stimulating and validating analysis of the subject of alien abduction phenomena, Exo introduced his listeners to a book called The Holographic Universe. That was what I was looking for. Something well respected that had the potential to tie paranormal events to science. But what the heck is the holographic universe exactly? It sounds like something that will make me want to cover my eyes and crawl into my easy chair and watch The Price is Right on infinite reruns. Just kidding. I don't own an easy chair. For the next few weeks moving forward, I am going to be discussing exactly what the holographic universe is. But can I tie it into the story of Oz? Okay, I'm going to interject an epiphany I had as I was contemplating Oz and holograms. How I didn't see this from the start is beyond me. I was trying to tie the movie to holographic principle, thinking about the land of Oz as an illusion in Dorothy's dream world. But is there actually a freaking hologram in the movie, aka the wizard's floating head? I mean, that would be super handy, right? My mind began spinning as I thought about the timelines that could tie the release of the movie and the holographic science together. I mean, the movie came out in 1939. The first hologram was actually constructed only in the 1960s, just 20 years later. Was it possible that holographic technology was in the news as early as the 1930s, as the movie was being produced? I had to look it up. Dang it. The hologram was first postulated in 1947. So I did a little more digging. The scene in the movie, which looked like a holographic process, was made by front projecting the image onto a screen and then adding steam in front of that. Not exactly a hologram. While researching, though, I came across another technology as old as the Victorian era that I thought could have been how they did it, called Pepper's Ghost. That wasn't how they did it, but it was cool. Pay close attention to the fish and the bull image in links below. Some of you may recognize a contemporary character that may have been created using this exact technique, so check it out. Anyway, regardless of how they actually created the floating head, it was intended to represent a realistic 3D floating talking wizard. If they had had holographic technology back then, I feel pretty sure they would have used it. They wanted it to look realistic. Back to the story. Dorothy and friends never questioned the validity of the existence of a wizard of such proportions. Everyone told them to go seek the wizard's advice as if that were the end all in Oz. I mean, they were all of the mindset that they were going to be meeting someone or something pretty dang formidable. So I think they pretty much expected to be faced with something physically bigger than themselves. The great and powerful Oz surely paints a picture of hugeness, or let me call it vastness. Maybe that's just it, though. They were stepping to the edge of their own reality, even in the land of Oz, up those steps to a realm they knew nothing about. He appeared to be vast, timeless, and omnipotent, and they had no choice but to obey his commands out of fear, really. It reminds me of the idea of cargo cult. Cargo cult occurs when a primitive culture sees something new and inexplicable for the first time and assumes, because they can't understand it, it must be magic. Here is a more succinct definition from rationalwiki.org. Cargo cults exemplify the third law of Arthur C. Clarke, that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from. Sounds like the prime directive would be in order, no? It wasn't until Toto or intuition or instinct pulled back the curtain, shedding light on that supposed reality, that our heroes realized it wasn't any kind of powerful entity at all. What they believed to be true of the wizard was just an illusion. They had put all their hopes in that illusion to solve their problems. They had put all their hopes in being saved by someone else instead of realizing it was and always had been up to themselves to work on their own problems. I can remember feeling my own ontological shock, perhaps, as Toto pulled back that curtain only to see that little man working those controls. But did he actually represent reality? Or did he represent a deeper message about cargo culture and, by extension, the notion behind the modern concept of the Prime Directive? Honestly, what comes to mind as I think about it is the Emerald City. Looking at it in all its glory in this context reduces it down to the very idea of a cargo cult for me. I use that term acknowledging that it isn't necessarily a negative thing. The mystery around the wizard and his obvious ability to maintain his cover long enough to have created a civilization that thrived on its own efforts to elevate him to a godlike status was paramount to his success. But they were happy, proud, and their lives seemed to have purpose, even if at the same time we can recognize their innocence kept them clueless in regards to who he truly was. Again, I'm not sure it is a bad thing. He created order and apparent safety from the witches. But it took our heroes, outsiders to the cargo culture, to learn the truth. As the wizard leaves Oz, we can see the people of the city were there to see him off. But he continues his facade of being the wizard even as he passes the torch of leadership over to the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion. The movie concluded with everyone getting what they wanted, but for me, the movie ended when that curtain was pulled back. It's from here we will launch into the holographic universe. Buckle those shoes up, Dorothy. It's going to be a rough ride. This book introduces us to concepts that exist beyond our current frame of reference, ours, beyond our current knowledge of reality. Originally published in 1991 with theories that were conjectured many years before that, it has gained massive respect in the scientific community over the years, and to this day hasn't been disproved. In and of itself, that's pretty huge in the science world. Is it the whole picture of what exists beyond the world that our senses can perceive? Not by a long shot. But just like the map is not the territory and the menu not the food, it is a well thought out map that attempts to explain how our reality works at a level beyond our perception. The movie The Wizard of Oz does hint to the question of what is reality anyway at the end of the movie, as we discussed in another episode. Whether or not Oz was real was inconsequential to the growth and change Dorothy went through because of the experience of it, though. Her perceptions about Kansas were changed, and upon her integration back into her family dynamics, she was able to appreciate the people around her in a way she wasn't able to before. I love that. I think every one of us would love to feel that fresh enthusiasm about our lives again, wouldn't we? I'm not a scientist, but I am a student of it, so I will do my best to relay the concepts to you in ways that are as easy to understand as possible. But ultimately, like I have said before, if something interests you, lean into it and do your own study. I will try to offer you support sources where I can. Why is this topic about holograms important, though? This is other, and this is science, but it is quantum in nature, which is a layer of reality beyond that which materialism and Newtonian physics can describe. Quantum physics is an umbrella term for that reality which exists beyond time and space. Newtonian physics, alternatively, discusses things measurable in time and space. Moving forward down the road, we need to be able to grasp some of these concepts to understand the big picture. The punchline. Besides, learning is cool. Here we go. The book, The Holographic Universe, written by Michael Talbot, opens with this quote in Psychology Today by Karl Pribram, 1919 to 2015. Neurosurgeon, psychologist, and philosopher. It isn't that the world of appearances is wrong. It isn't that there aren't objects out there at one level of reality. It's that if you penetrate through and look at the universe as a holographic system, you arrive at a different view, a different reality. And that other reality can explain things that have remained inexplicable scientifically, such as paranormal phenomena, synchronicity, the apparently meaningful coincidence of events. You see here at the end of the quote, the scientist is tying quantum physics and holography together with things that have remained inexplicable scientifically, such as paranormal events. I want you to really pay attention to this. This is a point of convergence. The Brain is Hologram, Chapter 1. Karl Pribram was curious about how and where memories are stored in the brain. And in the early 1940s, when he first became interested in this mystery, it was generally believed that memories were localized in the brain, such as the memory of the last time you saw your grandmother. It was believed to have a specific location somewhere in the brain cells. Such memory traces were then called engrams. And although no one knew what an engram was made of, scientists were pretty confident it was only a matter of time before one would be found. But one never was. Okay, bracket here. In 1946, Pribram went to work with a great neuropsychologist, Carl Lashley, in Orange Park, Florida. He had rats perform a variety of tasks such as maze. Then he surgically removed various portions of their brains and retested them. His aim was literally to cut out the area of the brains containing the memories of their maze ability. To his surprise, he found that no matter what portion of the brains he cut out, he could not eradicate their memories. Often, the rats' motor skills were impaired, and they stumbled through the mazes, but even with massive portions removed, their memories remained stubbornly intact. These were incredible findings. If memories possess specific locations in the brain, and in the same way that books possess specific location on library shelves, why didn't Lashley's surgical removals have any effect on them? The only answer seems to be that memories were not localized, specific brain sites, but were somehow spread out or distributed through the brain as a whole. The problem was that he knew of no mechanism or process that could account for such a state of affairs. Pribram continued to ponder the idea that memories were distributed throughout the brain, and the more he thought about it, the more convinced he became. After all, patients who had portions of their brains removed for medical reasons never suffered the loss of specific memories. Then, in the mid-1960s, an article he read in Scientific America describing the first construction of a hologram hit him like a thunderbolt. Not only was the concept of holography dazzling, but it provided a solution to the puzzle with which he had been wrestling. It's necessary to understand a little more about holograms. One of the things that makes holography possible is a phenomenon known as interference. It's the crisscrossing pattern that occurs when two or more waves, such as waves of water, ripple through each other. For example, if you drop a pebble into a pond, it will produce a series of concentric waves that expand outward. We're all familiar with that. If you drop two pebbles in a pond, you will get two sets of waves that expand and pass through one another. The complex arrangements of crest and troughs that result from such collisions is known as an interference pattern. Because laser light is an extremely pure, coherent form of light, It is especially good at creating interference patterns. It provides, in essence, the perfect pebble and the perfect pond as a result. It wasn't until the invention of the laser that the holograms as we know them today became even possible. A hologram is produced when a single laser light is split into two separate beams. The first beam is bounced off the object to be photographed. Then the second beam is allowed to collide with the reflected light of the first beam. When this happens, they create an interference pattern, which is then recorded on a piece of film behind it. The film then looks a little like the concentric rings that form when one throws a handful of pebbles into the pond. But as soon as a third laser beam is then shown through that film, a three-dimensional image of the original object appears behind the film. The three-dimensionality of such images is often eerily convincing. You can actually walk around the graphic projection and view it from different angles as you would a real object. However, if you reach out and try to touch it, you'll realize there's nothing there. In addition, when a piece of holographic film containing the image of an apple is cut in half and then illuminated by a laser, each half will still be found to contain the entire image of the apple, even if the halves are divided again and again. An entire apple can still be reconstructed from each small portion of the film. Although the portions are smaller, normal photographs, every small fragment of a piece of holographic film contains all the information recorded in the whole. This is what got Pribram so excited, and it offered at least a way of understanding how memories could be distributed rather than localized in the brain. If it was possible for every portion of a piece of holographic film to contain all the information necessary, then every part of the brain could contain all of the information necessary to recall a whole memory. The visual centers of the brain are also surprisingly resistant to surgical excision, even after removing as much as 90%. When the visual cortex is removed, the part of the brain that receives and interprets what the eyes see, he found it could still perform tests requiring complex visual skills. Similarly, research conducted by Pribram revealed that as much as 98% of a cat's optic nerve could be severed without seriously limiting its ability to perform complex visual tasks. According to the leading theory of that time, there was a one-to-one correspondence between the image, the eyes, and the way that is represented in the brain. In other words, when we looked at a square, it was believed the electrical activity in our visual cortex also possessed the form of the square. The only question that remained was what wavelength phenomenon the brain might be using to create such internal holograms. It was known that the electrical communications that take place between the brain's nerve cells, or neurons, do not occur alone. Neurons possess branches like little trees, and when an electrical message reaches the end of one of those branches, it radiates outward, as does the ripple in the pond. Because neurons are packed together so densely, these expanding ripples of electricity are also a wave-like phenomenon and are constantly crisscrossing one another. He realized that they were mostly interference patterns, and these in turn might give the brain its holographic properties. The hologram was there all the time in the wavefront nature of the brain's activity. We simply hadn't had the wit or the technology to realize it. It was quickly realized that the distributed nature of memory and vision were not the only neurophysiological puzzle the holographic model could explain. Holography also explains how our brains can store so many memories in so little space. It was once calculated that over the course of the average lifetime, the brain can store something on the order of 2.8 times 10 to the 20 bits of information. This is a staggering amount, and brain researchers have long struggled to come up with a mechanism that explains such vast capability. Holograms also possess a fantastic capacity of information storage. By changing the angle at which the two lasers strike a piece of photographic film, it is possible to record many different images on the same surface. Any image that's recorded can be retrieved simply by illuminating the film with a laser beam possessing the same angle as the original two beams. Employing this method, researchers have calculated that a 1-inch square piece of film can store the same amount of information contained in 50 Bibles. Pieces of holographic film containing multiple images, such as those described above, also provide a way of understanding our ability to both recall and forget. When such a piece of film is held in a laser beam tilted back and forth, the various images it contains appears and disappear in a glittering stream. It's been suggested that our ability to forget is equivalent to shining various beams on a piece of multiple image film, but failing to find the right angle to call up the image or memory for which we are searching. In the section called Phantom Limb Sensations and How We Construct a World Out There, the author discusses that it is obvious that our feelings and internal realities and the sound of orchestra playing in the heat of the sun are external realities. But it is not so clear how our brains enable us to distinguish between the two, and points out that when we look at a person, the image of a person is really on the surface of our retina, yet we do not perceive the person as being on our retina. We perceive them as being in the world out there. Similarly, when we stub our toe, we experience the pain in our toe. The pain is not really in our toe. It is actually a neurophysiological process taking place somewhere in here in our brain. Then how is our brain able to take the multitude of neurological, physiological processes that manifest as our experience, all of which are actually internal, and fool us into thinking that some are internal and some are located beyond the confines of our gray matter? Well, creating the illusion that things are located where they are not is the quintessential feature of a hologram. As mentioned, if you look at a hologram, it seems to have an extension in space. But if you pass your hand through it, you will quickly discover there is nothing there, despite what your senses tell you. No instrument will pick up the presence of any abnormal energy or substance, where the hologram appears to be hovering. This is because the hologram is a virtual image, an image that appears to be where it is not, and possesses no more extension in space than does the three-dimensional image you see of yourself when you look in a mirror. Your image is actually located on the mirror's surface, and a hologram is always in the photographic emulsion on the surface of the film recording it. Further evidence that the brain is able to fool us into thinking that interior processes are actually located outside the body comes from a Nobel Prize-winning physiologist. In the 1960s, he placed vibrators on the knees of blindfolded subjects and varied the rates at which the instruments vibrated, and in doing so discovered that he could make test subjects experience a sensation that the point source of vibration was jumping from one knee to the other. He could even make his subjects feel the point source of vibration in the space between their knees. In short, he demonstrated that humans have the ability to seemingly experience sensations in spatial locations where they have absolutely no sense receptors that work. This is compatible with the holographic view and sheds additional light on how interfering sources of physical vibration enable the brain to localize some of its experiences beyond the physical boundary of the body. Pribram feels this process might also explain the phantom limb phenomenon, or the sensations experienced by some with a missing off leg. It feels like it's still present. Individuals often feel realistic cramps, pains, and tingling in these phantom appendages. But maybe what they're experiencing is the holographic memory of the limb that is still recorded in the interference patterns in their brains. Wow, that's cool. I guess it would take some time for the brain to lose those interference patterns. There are many more implications and details about Pribram's discoveries. However, in the context of our discussion here, I think this is where we will take a break. But I do want to discuss the reaction of the scientific community at the time. Despite such evidence, Pribram's model remains extremely controversial. Part of the problem is that there are many theories of how the brain works, and there's evidence to support them all. Some researchers believe the distributed nature of memory can be explained by the flow of various chemicals. Others hold that electrical fluctuations among large groups of neurons can account for memory and learning. The holographic theory has its supporters, though, and it is probably safe to say that many scientists do remain persuaded by Pribram's arguments. Now remember, this book was written in 1991. Some scientists believed there at the time were too few experimental findings for which holography was the necessary or even preferable explanation. But Pribram was puzzled by those kinds of statements because even in 1991, there were well over 500 references to the data where researchers agreed. Dr. Larry Doss, former chief of staff at Medical City Dallas Hospital, admits that Pribram's theory challenged many long-held assumptions about the brain, but points out that many brain function specialists were attracted to the idea, even if for no other reason than the glaring inadequacies of the then present orthodox views. As for Pribram, by the 1970s, enough evidence had accumulated to convince him his theories were correct. In addition, he had taken his ideas into the laboratory and discovered that single neurons in the cortex respond selectively to a limited bandwidth of frequencies, a finding that further supported his conclusions. What bothered him was if the picture of reality in our brains is not a picture at all, but a hologram, then what is it? What is a hologram in the brain? The dilemma posed by this question is like taking a Polaroid picture of a group of people sitting around the table, and after the picture develops, finding that instead of people, there are only blurry clouds of patterns positioned around the table. In both cases, one would rightfully ask, which is the true reality? The seemingly objective world experienced by the observer, or the blur of interference patterns recorded by the camera? The brain. Realize that if the holographic model was taken to logical conclusions, it opens the door on the possibility that objective reality, the world of coffee cups, mountain vistas, elm trees, and table lamps, might not even exist, or at least not exist in the way we believe they exist. Pribram wondered, what if the mystics had been saying for centuries was actually true? Was Maya an illusion? And what was out there was really a vast resonating symphony of waveforms, a frequency domain that was transformed into the world as we know it only after it entered our senses. Understanding that the solution he was seeking might lie outside the province of his own field, he went to his physicist son for advice. His son recommended he look into the work of a physicist named David Bohm, and when Pribram did, he was electrified. He not only found the answer to his question, but also discovered that, according to Bohm, the entire universe was a hologram. Wow. So what are we getting at here? What Pribram discovered was that what we perceive in space and time, with our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and sense of touch, is only a construct derived by our senses, our body, to explain only what we need to know in order to survive in this universe. Super connection here to why robots can't be sentient. We'll touch on that later. The brain takes those interference patterns the senses can detect and interprets them as something useful to our survival. But the whole brain has some investment in the interpretations, not just local sections, as was previously believed. Does this mean our reality isn't real? No, that's not what it means. I think it means that there are, however, deeper levels of reality that can and will be explained by quantum physics. And we are so fortunate to be living at a time when that science, that description of what is happening at that deeper level, is emerging. But more importantly, as quantum physics begins to shed light on things that were previously unknowable, we will finally be able to acknowledge what the spiritual cultures around the world have been telling us throughout the millennia. There's something much, much deeper to reality than physical science, aka physics, can describe. Beyond the discussion of how our brains may work lies a deeper meaning to this introduction, one that becomes apparent when we realize there is definitely something beyond the veil of our current sense perception, beyond the rainbow, or perhaps even beyond the matrix. If we don't actively seek to understand our deepest reality, don't we fall prey to cargo culture mentality? There are definitely blatant thematic ties to another fantastic movie here, as I mentioned, The Matrix. I can't help but think about Cypher's own existential angst. He has seen the truth, aka this curtain's been pulled back for him, and what he saw was so hard, the knowledge of truth so uncomfortable that he longed for the blind innocence of his life before. So he ponders, why oh why didn't I take the blue pill? This channel is called Yellow Brick Road Rash for a reason. In my next chapter, I will be going a bit deeper and discussing the work of Dr. David Bohm. I look forward to seeing you here. Whew. Thank you again for being here. If you're enjoying this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. It will really help me know if I'm reaching anyone. Okay, so what do you think about my creamsicle, dreamsicle hair? I actually love it. What you don't know about me, and some of you might, is that I am most comfortable when I am being kind of outlandish. And so coloring my hair different colors might be part of my exploring other. Maybe then it'll be part of you exploring other as well. Okay, now I'm done. Bye.